Welcome, everyone. I am super excited to have two of my favorite NFT artists today in this space, Anne and Rebekka. We are going to do a panel. I know Anne has a tight schedule today, so we'll go about 45 minutes and then we'll leave some questions for all of you. Let me know in the chat if you can hear me. And I think that looks good. Yes, first I'll introduce quickly what we're doing here with this forum, and then we'll jump into the conversation, and I'll properly introduce and welcome my guests. But first of all, thank you, Becca, and thank you, Anne, for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Great. Oh, nice. See, this WhatsApp thing is going to show up. Okay, Kevin, stop texting me. Great. So the all-time high Web3 forum is basically just we wanted to open a space for conversations about all things Web3, really kind of get the word out on what it is, what it does, what the opportunities are, and of course, one of the big things that you can do and it's used for is art and Web3 and NFTs, and you'll see in this conversation that I think there's really some interesting opportunities that haven't existed before, and today I wanted to turn the attention specifically to NFTs and NFT art, and we'll be talking to two of my favorite creators in this space, and to my right, you'll see Anne, who's the lead artist and co-founder of one of the most successful cannabis projects, or maybe the most successful cannabis project in the Web3 space, called Stoned Ape Crew. She also founded the NFT Artist Squad, which is basically a creative agency specializing in Web3 solutions. And then also I have here with me the Berlin legend Rebekka Revel, who not only is a fine artist, but wrote a PhD on art and has an academic angle. She's also the co-founder of the Solana Superteam Germany and founded the NFT Club Berlin. So with that, very warm welcome to both of you.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us.
I want to start basically just to give people a background who are watching, just in terms of like, what's your background? Talk a little bit about what you did before you started doing what you do now, and we'll talk a lot about that later. Yeah, maybe Anne, you want to start. What did you do before you became the co-founder of an NFT project?
Sure. So I'm a business psychologist. I studied business psychology. I'm from the corporate world, so I've been working at Porsche and Axel Springer and in the big corporate world before, and it was so boring that I started to do graphic recording, so it was to draw live during events. And I met my co-founder at another cryptocurrency startup, I think 5 years ago. And he approached me 2 years ago and asked me if I would be down to do stoned flamingo NFTs, which turned into apes. And now I'm here.
Amazing. Becca, introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you. I'm originally Canadian, but I moved to Germany in like 2008 with like an exchange semester to Germany, to Hamburg. I was studying fine art, and I've always done art. It's always been something that it's sort of my driving force. And I moved to Germany, and I continued to study, and then continued to study even more. So I ended up at sort of this intersection of anthropology and art and Buddhism. And then I got really into streaming, actually, on Twitch, streaming my traditional art process. And because after doing my PhD, I was like, I really need a break. Academia is really toxic, and I just need to go back to what I love. And so I needed something to do. Actually, I was doing like an exchange of mini, what was it called? Like a research trip to Canada, and I was just like alone for a lot of time. So I started streaming my art and continued to do that for actually 2 years, and really like hardcore. And it got me more familiar with like tech stuff. Even in like 2001, I didn't even have a cell phone, or like a smartphone. And it got me more into like internet culture and memes because I'm an old lady. And then um, I then was asked to do to be the lead artist on an NFT project like mid 2021, and I was like, that sounds interesting, and royalties, and artists can own their work, and this is like a revolutionary that you can like digital asset ownership is like blew my mind. And then I just went really deep down the Web3 rabbit hole, founded an NFT club, and yeah, I have the honor of working for Solana and developing the German ecosystem here in our beautiful country. So yeah.
Really amazing. Do you guys remember when you first heard about blockchain and what all of that was, and maybe your first impressions of what that sounded like?
I was so hyped. Like I was so hyped with the political idea that everyone is free and everyone owns his own money and everything and it's his own bank. Um, but yeah, I was super hyped the first time. Definitely, I remember the time.
Do you remember what it was specifically that was like, this is something that's interesting, that's an opportunity for, I don't know, you personally, but also society, say?
I think it's a bit different. Like for the first time when I heard from cryptocurrencies, I think it was when I was a student, and for me it was just such a cool idea to have kind of to be their own bank. Um, and later on with NFTs, I think Rebekka already mentioned it, but the idea of royalties and really artists participating from the art long time is super fascinating, definitely.
Yeah, for me, I was just really confused. I was like, it's what? I don't know. Like, it doesn't make sense to me. I'm not a tech person. Like, I was terribly confused. Like, I remember hearing about, like, really, like, late 2020, early 2021, like the big Beeple sale, and there was kind of like an explosion in NFT talk, and I was like, what does that even mean? What? But it wasn't until I started working with this NFT project that ended up bugging me actually,
Oh,
that I was like, oh, so what does this actually mean, right? So then I stayed confused for a very long time.
talk about
And
that.
sometimes I still am, but you just do your best.
Talk about that first experience that they found you. How and how did you agree to start doing that?
Well, actually, it's my husband's cousin,
Okay.
with a young guy with big plans and ideas, and he had been really into the NFT scene for quite a while. And when my husband would go back to the States and visit his family, he would like hype them all up, be like, "This squiggle costs 30K. This penguin is 200K." I just yeah, it was ridiculous, and so. And they're like, yeah, we need an artist. And they're like, oh, hey, isn't your wife an artist? And so I got sucked in. But I mean, the project sounded interesting, right? They actually had legit partnership with a big museum. I'm really into skulls, and it was based off of a saber-toothed tiger skull, and they actually bought the skull and all this kind of stuff. And yeah, and so I actually did a lot of research because no one else in the team was doing any work. And I was like, okay, if we're going to make this successful, how do we do that? Like, what are the marketing strategies? Who are the main key players in the scene? What are we going to do? How are we going to do it? And so I ended up learning a lot and trying to move everything forward. And then it had a bad ending. We won't get into that. But they basically wrote the project doesn't exist. So that's the short story.
But that's a very methodical approach to like actually exploring it and learning the basics of it. And I know that you're also like, I know that you have your own agency now, but you also have this marketing background. Is that something that kind of informed how you entered this space as well? Yeah?
Yeah, I think that my psychological background has such a big influence on the art as well. That's, for example, the reason why our PFPs are left-facing and not right-facing. And why we have so many roles. So when we started off the project, I tried to do kind of psychological character studies of people and ended up with the roles. And also the left facing is a result of I've been looked into. I looked into many studies, like PF kind of portrait studies, and they said that PFPs that are looking to the left are kind of more emotional, and PFPs that are right-facing look kind of more self-confident but also more aggressive. And we of course wanted to look more chill and emotional, and that's why we decided to go to the left-facing. And also, for example, in the Renaissance, all the portraits were left-facing as well. So a lot of our decisions are based on studies. And it's really such a fun part for me to do this conceptualizing and look into studies and to see what would, if there are kind of scientific studies about specific art decisions as well, that would be more appealing to our target group. I feel like the PFP space is much more strategic, right, than one-out-of-one space. So yeah, I'm also super like excited for our upcoming one-out-of-one series, where I'm trying to merge these two spaces more together, because I feel they are kind of, I don't know, disconnected sometimes. Many of our holders and also many PFP holders that I'm talking to are not so into one-out-of-one art because they are just not kind of educated enough. Never got in touch with them, don't know how to buy, what they should consider if they want to collect art. And I feel that we can do so much more to merge these two spaces and educate our holders to become cool collectors.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I kind of wonder, like, Becca, you've never done a generative art project, have you? You're always one of one?
I mean, how I got into it was technically it was a generative art project.
Okay.
And after that, after getting worked so hard, I was like, I think I'm gonna go back to doing my own thing. And so that was my one and only experience with it.
Because I think, I mean, what Anne was just saying is it's such an interesting point. Like there's a few different approaches to NFT art, right? Like one is this very much like translating what is, just classic fine art into this space, maybe not even, selling just the digital version of it, but having both a digital and a physical copy. And then there's this kind of almost scientific approach that you just described, and which is like having basically these character traits and being very aware of who your target group is and what resonates with them, and then creating the templates that you can make thousands of unique pieces with, but they all connect the same thing. So I'm very curious also, Becca, like how you feel about the kind of like, are you a collector of generative art? Is that something that you still mess with, that resonates with you, or are you really like still kind of a traditionalist in terms of one-of-one stuff?
Well, I see it as a little bit on like a spectrum, because also when we say generative art, it can also refer to artists that are creating art with code, right? And so I kind of see the NFT spectrum from like PFP projects like the 10K collections. And then, there are also boutique collections where there's maybe a few hundred or even sometimes more, and they're all hand-drawn, for example. And then there's, on another piece of the spectrum, there's one-of-one art, but that's being sold for an edition, right? So there's like an edition of 100 of one more like traditional fine art piece, right? And then on the other side of the spectrum, there's really just like the one-of-one, whereas there's only one. There's no editions attached to it, anything like that. And so I sort of see it as like a bit of a linear spectrum. And then of course there's like branches off of that depending on all of the really fascinating developments, the people using gamification to get collectors to change, they can take the art pieces and combine them. And there's some really, really fascinating stuff that goes along with that. And generative art, art based on code is its own genre in that as well, which I think is absolutely fascinating. The Code Canvas is the newest, most up-and-coming generative art platform on Solana, also a branch from Exchange. And actually my phone background is a beautiful piece that I collected a few weeks back. But typically I do collect more one-of-one pieces, and I'm friendly with also the 10K collections. I mean, I'm a poor artist, so I can't afford a lot of it. I really try to get a Mad Lads, and I have a very petite collection of PFPs, and they're mostly art based, like pop heads and stuff like that.
Yeah. What is your general feeling of the kind of connection that's always, I don't know, this big discussion, like are NFTs just art, or do you need to attach something else with it, some kind of utility that is kind of intrinsically linked often with many collections? I mean, Stoned Apes are doing very much like real life stuff now, and like I'm just super curious. Maybe Rebekka, you want to actually start there, like how you feel about this kind of expectation maybe that collectors have that NFTs are or have to be more than just the piece of art, and what your personal philosophy on that is.
I mean, like, just as much as there's all of these different kinds of NFTs, there's also a whole bunch of different kinds of collectors, right? There are a lot of collectors in the one-of-one art space, and they're like, this is an art piece, and I'm collecting it because I have a connection with it, and I resonate with it, and I want to support the artist, or I like their philosophy, or like, there's a lot of reasons people collect. On the other side of the 10K more generative PFP projects, there is typically some kind of reward system or utility or something. And what I think is really interesting is that there is so much diversity in what people are doing, and what blockchain technology allows is a complete rethink of how we distribute art and what we can do with it, right? In terms of perks and rewards and communities, and even like things like ticketing and airdrops. Like, there are so many new interesting things that you can do that have never been able to be explored before. So I think it's a really challenging discussion once it gets into like the one-of-one art side of things, because artists, we're here to create art, and expecting a certain kind of utility or return or reward for collecting isn't really the right way to go about it. And it's a little bit of a challenging discussion sometimes. But I also think it's an important one that needs to happen more frequently too.
What does the brand strategist say? Well, how did you feel about, like, what was Stoned Apes always a kind of a utility forward thing, or did you guys start thinking about it in terms of like a project, a PFP project for stoners essentially, and then the utility was attached later?
I think utility was the most important thing from the start on, because my co-founder PFO was our techno king, and he's always, delivering utility all the time. So, I mean, like, also on the technical side, especially, we were the first project implementing this staking thing, one among the first ones who did this evolution process. But I think, like, for one-of-one space, there's this big meme which says the utility is the art, right?
Mm-hmm.
For collectors. I think mostly also about the personal relationship and connection you have to the artists. I met so many one-on-one artists in New York, and they were so amazing. And I think if you first of course the visual part, but also the personal connection you have with the one-on-one artist. And I think also we as PFP artists, our biggest superpower should be to create art where people can become super fans. Like, for example, our beanies. They later just developed a kind of a beanie DAO and then produced, I think, 500 beanies themselves. They are all on chain as an NFT, and we're also minted out. I think if you are able to create art where people become super fans later on from based on the DAOs and or based on the trades, that should be our superpower as well, which is kind of an utility, right? Because you are using BIP in order to run your own projects. But I feel like on Solana, the whole IP thing is not as much used as on Ethereum, for example. And I wish it would be used more. And I also think that that should be one of our main responsibilities as PFP artists to create the art from the start on, that people really become super fans in the end.
Mm-hmm. PFP, by the way, for anyone watching who's not familiar with this, are profile pictures. I know that this is, you know, kind of the education I'm also going for here. I'm super curious about that aspect, by the way. Like you mentioned basically your philosophy there, and what is the kind of thing that you are looking to create as an artist in this space, and also how does the technology maybe specifically help you to achieve that you couldn't as a, you know, in the Web2 and in the real art world, let's put it.
So I mean, like I only created PFP art before, so I would love to tap more into the one-on-one space actually. But I mean, like if I can speak for our space, as I said, I think one of our main superpowers should be to create kind of digital identities, to also spin the whole storytelling and lore part around it. And the ultimate goal, of course, would be to create kind of people that love you out so much that they run with your brand message forward, and also spread it with the whole network and community. And I think this is the best case scenario for digital identity, like in the PFP space.
How about you, Becca?
More about identity and what was the original question?
More about like the kind of stuff that you like to create in this space, and also how maybe the technology helps you create, you know, what you want to create, and how it differs from the previous work that you've done in the fine arts.
Well, I'm a traditional artist. Like I need like paper or canvas and inks and paints. Like I'm a very tactile, tangible person, and a lot of the effects you just can't get in digitally, or at least I don't feel like they are what I want. And one thing though that I really enjoy doing is bringing my traditional art into kind of the digital realm. And for example, I have my floor is actually covered in like an art project right now. For example, for the mangroves by edition plant a mangrove tree, what I did is I've made a whole bunch of different prints, like a printmaking method, and I scan them all in, and then I layer them digitally. So they started out as a tangible piece, like I've painted it, and then it turns into something that couldn't exist in IRL. And so playing with that and playing with the relationship between physical and digital for me is what's really, really exciting. And then having a finished digital asset, or having something that some of my artwork is also moving or animation, where I take my physical artworks, I scan it in, and then I scan in different backgrounds and I alter it to make different versions. The one for Drip House that got sent out for Earth Day is basically the same process where I created traditional art and then turned it into an animation, which can't exist as a painting on itself. So for me, that kind of relationship is what I am most really into and excited about these days.
And how about collectors? You mentioned them, or Anne also mentioned them, like the kind of relationship that you can have that maybe is a little bit different from somebody goes into a gallery, buys your work, maybe never meet them, but here auctioning your work, and then somebody can say, hey, I really like this piece. Can you, how does that interaction, or how did the space kind of change that interaction for you?
It's revolutionary. Like previously in traditional gallery contexts, you don't really have any connection with your collector. You give your artwork to the gallery, the collectors come to the gallery, and they have the interaction. You don't really know who has it, where it went, anything about them. And so this really like personal relationship that you end up developing with collectors in the NFT space, because it's its own little bubble, is really, really special. For me, that is one of those most meaningful aspects of it, is when people see my art and they're like, wow, this really speaks to me, and we end up having a conversation about it. Like for me, that is so gratifying that I get to share even more about my art than what is maybe written in the description, and it makes me feel like they understand my concepts and my art and my values in a much deeper way. And so for me, making it that much more personal is one of the biggest values and benefits of being in our space.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, I really think it's such a different relationship that you can have there, and you mentioned kind of storytelling and maybe super fans and all of that. How did you find that process of kind of like having not just maybe a collector, but actually a person that's involved in the development of the project in a much more in a deeper way than maybe just buying a piece of art and then hanging it on the wall?
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, like, if you see your art is like getting just real, that's really amazing. Definitely. I also love your point so much, Becca. And I don't know how is it for you, but I feel it's also sometimes kind of overwhelming to get so much external feedback suddenly, because before I don't know how it was before, but apparently the main process was through the galleries. But suddenly, I don't know, you get feedback from 5,000 people or something like that. That must be a lot.
Yeah, I mean, most people, at least in the NFT space, we start out small. Luckily, it's not 500 people all at once, unless there is some kind of explosive social media event or something like that. Typically, it is a little bit of like a slow baby steps process of like, okay, I'm going to test this out, and then you end up selling it for 0.1 or then 0.2 and then 0.5, and it's a slow kind of steady development rather than something that happens overnight. And I know that there's a lot of different artists and they feel differently about it. Some of them are a little bit more shy and they're like, yeah, I don't know, it's hard for me to communicate with people, and other artists really lean into it and they actually will aggressively write collectors. So there's a lot of different kinds of ways people approach it as well.
For you, Abo, you guys have how many, like 8,000 holders or something? Is that a lot of pressure that you feel at times too, when there's so many people kind of like intimately involved in, I don't know, just what your daily work is kind of? Is that a lot, or is that something that, I don't know, motivates you or drives you?
I like, definitely it motivates me a lot. It's amazing to get in touch with the holder directly. And in the beginning, it was very overwhelming for me because I'm coming from the corporate world, coming from B2B. It was so crazy to actually having people to getting direct contact to the people buying the art. And also our holders are lovely, like they're so loyal, and they are they are also I think we also have such high count of people that are using their PFPs for a very long time. So they are really the emotional kind of utility or emotional attachment is super high. So I think we did an art improvement kind of once. And I got like so many messages because some details changed. And this was also kind of overwhelming for me. But I'm learning from it, and it's also extremely helpful in order to co-create VR together. I would say 70 or 80% of our OG collection is based on community feedback, and they're based on community votes and suggestions. And I would say that's also one of the best ways to really create a community really create a collection where people vibe with and identify with because they kind of co-created it. So it has, I would say, the benefits definitely outweighs the negative aspects of it.
Yeah, I remember you telling me early on that the way you created the first drafts or whatever of the apes were actually you hung out with a bunch of people and then you kind of like jotted down some stuff and then turned it into these templates, right?
Exactly. I actually have like for the scientist, the farmer, and the businessman, for example, I have specific people in mind that look exactly like that. So yeah, that was super fun. That's also one of the best part of the process for me.
Have you also had this co-creation experience, Becca? Is that something that where you would also, I don't know, maybe accept someone's request and like can you do this kind of art or something like that? Has there been an example in your life too, your work?
I used to do a lot of commissions, and it's always been a struggle. For me, it's always been a struggle. It's like for some reason, I don't know what it's like pulling teeth for me to act. It's like doing my homework and I'm like, oh, because I'm not making art for myself and it's usually something that I wouldn't necessarily make. And so I don't really accept commissions anymore. One thing that I do enjoy doing though is collaborations. And one thing I really love about our NFT space is there are a lot of one-on-one artists that do collaborate with each other. And also being engaged with sort of community kind of events or drops. One example is it was called Mary drop on collector.sh a few weeks back, and the theme was Mary, like the religious figure. And doing something like that is really fun for me. Like it's not like a commission, like someone telling me to do something, but it was like, hey, we're all doing this together. If you want to join, do the moves. And so for that was a lot of fun, or like the mangrove project that I'm doing right now, for example. So doing artwork to participate in some kind of group activity or for a good cause, I find that really enjoyable. And collaborations are also a lot of fun.
Yeah, I love that. That's actually a great point. How has the kind of like connecting with other artists or the opportunity to have like, it's a relatively small space, right? I assume, where you can kind of like still know everyone and collaborate and do all of that. How has that changed your kind of like creative approach in a way? Either of you can take that.
For me, it not really hasn't changed my approach so much. And I haven't really done so many like direct collabs. I have one that is in the works. They're just waiting for me to actually do something. But granted, it's only like we only discussed it like 3 days ago, and so I really like the idea of giving my art to somebody that I really like what they do, and we kind of complement each other and kind of doing something like that. And we'll see where it goes.
How about you, Anne?
In our upcoming One Out of One series, we are partnering with a lot of One Out of One artists that are kind of using the basic character and just translating it in their style, and also with their own kind of story. And that would be my first collaboration actually outside my apartment. So I've been just living and breathing the last kind of 2 years in SAC. So I'm really looking forward to this one.
Yeah. I mean, that's actually an interesting thing. There's like the internet is full of memes, meming and remixing and all of that. And I think that's something probably that we'll see a lot more of, right, in kind of like the NFT and art space.
Yeah.
So, by the way, if anybody has questions for Anne, she needs to jump on a call in a minute. So let me know in the YouTube chat. Type out your questions if you have any. I did want to tackle for a minute. Like there's obviously, we discussed like a lot about the new things, the new opportunities that it brings. I just wanted to, for a minute, we don't have to spend too much time on it, but the kind of like, what are some negative experiences or challenges that you've encountered that, I don't know, where you wish, like, I don't know, the space was different, or people would approach your process differently? I know there's like a lot of, talk about floor prices that you need to worry about as a profile picture collection or something like that. Is there anything specifically that stands out to either of you that hasn't been that great, or where you see room for improvement? Let's put it.
And do you want to start?
I mean, for one out of one series, I was looking at the one out of one space a bit, and I felt that we have so many amazing artists and creators on our platform, but not so many platforms that can be used, kind of. So I wish there would be more.
What kind of platforms do you mean? Like exhibiting opportunities, or?
Exactly, like platforms that are just supporting one out of one artists, where you can auction your art, offer your art. I just think there's not so much in our space if you really look at it. Yeah. Like, I think
there's one.
That's just one. That's just the one. Basically, yeah. And I think that's just enough. Like, I think we definitely need more platforms. And another thing that I also mentioned in the beginning is, I think we also need much more education for people on one out of one art, especially in the PFP space. So I would love to educate our holders on how to become good collectors, actually, collectors that one out of one artists would love to have. That are the two main points for me at the moment.
Also, if you have any, Lukas, if you have any more questions for Anna, I know she has to go in like 6 minutes, so you can squeeze all the juice out of her, and I can answer the question as well.
Okay, yeah, maybe let's stay on that for a minute. What kind of like educational forums or opportunities to educate holders would you like to see, and what is a good collector? I'm very curious too. I want to be a good collector, so.
I think a good collector should not care about the floor price, kind of, and the art would be the utility, has a good personal connection to the one out of one artist, and for the educational options, I would say artist spotlights, giving the artist a special role, doing spaces. I also feel that video content is not that, like, we don't have a lot of video artist content on Twitter. I think that could be much more again as well. I think Form Function had a YouTube series, which is great. Yeah, and also like basically giving artists a kind of a stage where they can have a voice and present their art and talk about their art.
Yeah. Do you think like the metaverse, or like what are some things that you would picture? Because I'll speak about that. I don't want to say too much about my own projects here because it's really about giving you guys the stage. But we do have this, like, we opened a metaverse gallery which basically collects different pieces of art in it. We did like an artist space, a panel directly in the metaverse where they could talk about their art. Is that the kind of like opportunities that are lacking? What are some other kind of, I don't know, ways to really spotlight artists and support NFT and digital artists?
I would be super curious, Becca, what would be your opinion on this one? Where do you think can we support you more from also the PFP side, for example, to give you more spotlight?
I think it's exactly like you say, like there are a lot of collectors that just need a little more exposure and maybe a little bit more education. And I think, that you can see there are some projects. Claynosaurus, for example, had a project with, I think, 8 or 10 quite large Solana one-on-one artists for one of their New York events. And so I think bringing one-of-one artists into the PFP space and doing something collaborative there can also give a lot of exposure to the collectors that don't really know. Like they often need sort of that beginning little taster of like, oh, that's actually really cool. Who is that person? And then it's like, oh, they have an auction going on next week, right? This like these baby steps of getting people a little bit more familiar. And I think that's something that the PFP side of things also can help support in those kinds of ways too.
How important do you guys think are like these physical events like NFT NYC? Most of like all of these conferences where you have, I think there's a lot of like tech obviously and people that are there for the tech, but there's also the specifically NFT NYC and wherever these things happen. Like how important for like are these forums for artists and also like maybe what opportunities are lacking there to give artists more of a space to talk about their work or to spotlight different pieces of work?
Yeah, I loved it. I also loved the concept in NYC for the Amsterdam Solana project. We would love to host a kind of a pop-in gallery to bring one-on-one artists and collectors together and provide a read. I think this is such a different experience to really meet one-on-one artists in real life and build this personal collection and also talk about the art. This is definitely very hard because people are all over the world, right? Like the collectors are spread all over the world. But I definitely think that in real life, galleries and meetups are extremely important for the space. That's also what the NFT club is doing. It's great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Shill your club, Becca.
I think it's hugely important to meet people face to face because the world of crypto Twitter is so anonymous and it's very kind of removed from reality, and you can develop such a better, meaningful connection just in 5 minutes with somebody IRL versus 6 months of like Twitter DMs or something. I think especially after COVID and having a lot of distance between people and having just this tech in between people communicating, it's really important to have these social gatherings and where people get together and they can share excitement and they can share just real life experiences with each other.
And I have one question from the audience for you, and then we'll let you go. I know you have to go. Somebody asked if you have any suggestions on like how social media maybe could be used to better display maybe art or like how we can use that to really maybe highlight artists and that use that medium to really push NFTs. That's at least that's how I read the question.
The question is how to use social media to push NFTs.
Yeah, how to better use that as maybe an artist spotlight and what we can do there to improve from a creator side.
Yeah. Okay. So like if you would like to start as a creator and artist.
I can read you the question. Hang on.
Sure.
Are there tech improvements via social media that you think would better incorporate NFTs?
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, so I think something what I have mentioned was the video content. So I think that it's not very, I don't know why, but not many artists are using it yet. I think that could be something that would be interesting to foster more and also like to support more on Twitter, for example. It's also, you can just also just show much more, show so much more of the behind the scenes, which is super interesting for collectors as well, than just showing the final kind of art. Um, and yeah, I also think maybe to implement kind of highlighting posts, like kind of spotlight posts, that would be interesting as well. Or like kind of categories, maybe that would be interesting as well, I think. To have it was, for example, 1 out of 1 category which was spotlighted in a special way.
Yeah, almost like filters or something.
Yeah, random idea. Yeah.
I like that idea.
And also maybe of course, if you're collecting from a special artist, to incorporate something in your profile so everybody can see it. That would be also an idea.
Great, and thank you so much for your time. I'll let you go now if you need to.
It was great. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you for joining.
Bye.
We'll see you soon.
Bye.
Becca, let's talk about the future of art. Let's take this as a break and then kind of like use the last few minutes to maybe discuss where you see this is the space is going and like some developments that you foresee. I do think we need to talk about AI for at least 2 minutes just because everybody's doing it. I'm bored with it, but let's still touch on it. If anybody has any questions, please ask them now. Let's start slow. Kind of like in this new world that you see, and especially with your experience as like the fine art and where we're now, where do you see this space kind of like, do you see a direction where things are going? Do you see where do you see us in 3 years, 5 years?
I mean, it's really interesting because, the traditional art world is, of course, everything is connected in terms of like larger market movements and stuff like that. However, because we are in a little bit of a not entirely closed ecosystem, but there's a much stronger domino effect, right? From crypto market to NFT. Engagement and the health of the ecosystem in some larger senses. But I mean, even just saying health is kind of a weird thing because, a year ago, we were having huge numbers of artists just like flocking into the space, maybe a little more than a year. And it's at that time, it was sort of in a really intense bull market. It's really like quantity over quality, right? Because if people are just flooding into the space and everyone's like, yeah, I can make so much money just off of like whatever. And so the sincerity kind of disappears a little bit. So I think because there is such a strong relationship between what the market is doing and what happens in the NFT space, that is prone to fluctuation, right? And we don't know when the things will change and everything goes in waves and cycles and whatever. And so even in our little space, 3 years is a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm hoping, what I think would be really great is that, a lot of people say it's not a bear market, it's a builder's market, right? Because there's less hype, there's less screaming, there's less like to the moon, just pitching for random things and getting showered of money, right? People are really kind of focused like, okay, what are we building? How are we going to make it really get the foundation built as solid as we can? How are we going to make a product? Because it's a lot harder to make it these days. So quality is very, very important. And I think if we can continue to support the art ecosystem, especially with tooling, I think is really huge. Like I mentioned, in our Solana ecosystem, unfortunately, we have very few marketplaces at the moment that focus and support fine artists and one-of-one artists. And so I think having a little bit more of a robust ecosystem is really, really healthy. That, there's a little bit more competition in different segments and that there are sort of a variety of options that kind of benefits also the artists, and it also, benefits the different marketplaces and platforms that they can kind of continue learning from each other and lifting each other up. And I am really, really hoping that the tooling will develop. It's come in a very long way. It's in like the last year and a half since I've been in Solana. The user interface has gotten so much better. So the future, I really hope that it becomes so seamless and so easy to use that the onboarding process for artists becomes much, much easier, because it's one of the biggest challenges that artists have. It's getting into the space and they're like, this is terrifying. I have no idea what's going on. I don't know what a wallet is. I don't know, there's all this weird language. So I think moving forward, it will hopefully just get easier and easier and easier to onboard people and to make them understand what digital asset ownership means and what it means to actually own your own artwork and have provenance and get royalties and all of these different aspects. So I think there will be a slow but hopefully steady road into more mainstream adoption and more galleries getting interested and exhibitions and all of the things that make a really robust art ecosystem.
I was told, I think it was 2 years ago at this point, that MoMA had hired an NFT curator. I don't know if they since were let go because it's a bear market and nobody cares anymore or something. I was at MoMA a few months ago and I didn't see NFT art. But I think it's an interesting thing. Like, do you see that that like the traditional art space? Have you seen kind of a shift in a mindset where that is becoming more of a topic and it's being taken more seriously, or is that still very much like stay over there with your PFPs and whatever else you're doing?
It's very slow and it's very minimal, and it's also quite market dependent. There are and have been a few interesting projects with different museums and galleries that have different collections, or they fractionalize the Klimt piece. There's been a little bit of dabbling, but there hasn't been so many really large scale movements. It's pretty sporadic. And there's not that many people that are really at that exact crossroads of onboarding museums and galleries. I know one person at Tezos that does it, and she's done an incredible job in the last years in Europe especially, and kind of developing a system for onboarding galleries and artists. And there's also somebody in the US that I know that's doing something similar and working at a regional museum. Totally forgotten where it was. But yeah, it's a long ways off, especially because the people in those institutions are a little bit more traditional, a little bit more kind of reserved, and there's usually very few people that will actually support them and help them and hold their hand and be like, okay, I know everything about this. Here's the concept. This is what would be beneficial for you. Here's the developer that is going to create all of this, because you need really, somebody to do the marketing and teach people what the concept is behind it and why they should care. And on top of it, you need the tech support, right? So it's quite a very specific niche. And on top of it, you need different skill sets within that niche. So there's not that many people that are really at that crossroads and that are really tackling it. So I think if we had more talent that was really excited and had the background and knowledge to approach museums, it could go a lot faster. But that's also lacking.
Yeah. So there's basically if this is the Web3 art space, then we need to get the tooling, make it easy for artists and creatives to get in here and understand how to use the space. But then also we need, of course, the side that will pay them, essentially museums, collectors, etc. need to make it easy for them to also collect and kind of bring them together. And that's a huge kind of educational process and all of that. I wonder in how far, like if there's any, I don't know, black swan events in that sense, where there's like one huge art, like, Jeff Koons, whatever, decides to only do, fractionalize his stuff or do a huge NFT fidgetal piece or something like that. Would you think that would kind of, set us off on a path where there's some kind of mass adoption thing there? And also, by the way, what do you think is the role of art towards adoption of blockchain? Do you think that's a relevant piece of the puzzle, or is that something we shouldn't think of?
So the first question, there actually have been a few, like Damien Hirst, for example, had an NFT collection.
I didn't know that.
Like there's some like top tier artists that are playing around with it. And it does help mass adoption. It's sort of taken a little bit as like a curiosity, novelty, maybe it seems. But in terms of adoption, something like 80% of new wallets, the first interaction they have is with an NFT. Most people aren't into DeFi. They're not really like there's all these weird branches. But typically something to do with NFTs is the very first interaction. And art is often where the mainstream can get onboarded to stuff, like where the artists are, typically there's some kind of like following behind that. We don't have quite the artists on board entirely yet. It is beginning. But I think especially being able to give experiences and gallery exhibitions. We did numerous gallery exhibitions here last year in Berlin with the NFT Club. And it went really, really well. It was able to onboard artists and collectors. If you're like in this great gallery space and you see all this incredible artwork, you meet the artists, you hear about their work, and they're like, oh yes, and actually you can buy this piece, and it's an animation or it's digital, because there's previously no other way to collect digitally native work. So having this connection to especially IRL events, you can kind of hold people's hands and show them through the process of like, this is what a wallet is, this is how you collect it, this is how this works, this is the marketplace. And education is a huge part of that. But I think having this first contact point is being something around an art experience or something that is kind of has that emotional draw to it, I think is really, really valuable, because people's ideas of NFTs is unfortunately very skewed towards the negative of like, oh, it's all scams and monkeys and whatever, and it's something that they don't understand.
You get rugged by your cousin.
Exactly. Exactly. So giving people a positive experience and showing that there is amazing art and there are amazing artists and that this is something we're supporting is, I think, one of the most foundational aspects of it.
That's amazing. I don't want to talk about AI anymore because, we'll the
only thing I will say to AI,
okay,
not AI art in particular, but AI in general, is I don't think we understand what a pivotal moment we're living through right now. The release of ChatGPT into our broad society, like, I don't think we understand how revolutionary this time that we're living through is. Like, I really don't think we're like fully comprehending if like in 20 years, like this year is going to be like, oh, that's when it really started. This was like the origin point. We can be like, I remember that. I remember when I first tried ChatGPT. And I think we have no idea how it's going to shape our lives. So I think, just to like understand that this is actually a really kind of revolutionary, mind-blowing point in time in terms of that, I think is, for me, actually really interesting. Well, the art is a whole nother situation, but just in general of how it's entering our society.
Well, you did open that can of worms, so I will ask you one question about AI and that pivotal moment that you just mentioned. Do you feel like, you're very much connected in still like the physical process, but do you feel like that in the future, in the next 5 years or whatever even, artists will kind of become co-creators with this kind of technology, or is that like, where do you see AI fit in kind of the creative process, both personally and also in the space at large, let's say?
I mean, me personally, the only interest or potential use for me is that it can help me create reference pictures, right? If I'm going to draw like a really realistic portrait or something, and I'm like, okay, I want to have this pose and I want to have this kind of lighting, then it's like, all right, I can either scroll through zillions of images or I can have something that is sort of created specifically to what I want, and to do ideation around that. I am very much like a traditionalist in a way. Like I feel like developing skills is very important, and if you don't develop the skills to paint realistically or in different styles, then you don't get to choose, right? It's not a conscious decision of like, okay, I'm going to paint this because that's how I want to express myself. You're only painting in one way because that's the only way you know how, right? For me, it's really important to be able to decide with very consciously, like, okay, I want to draw this really realistically, or no, I actually want to do abstract today, but it's a very conscious decision. It's not because I can't do one. So I think the development of skills is really an important aspect of being an artist, to consciously know, okay, what is my composition? What is my color use? How am I deciding to create this? Or, rather than just being the default of like, oh, I can't do anything else. And so AI has taken away the need for skill development and actually creating a craft out of art creation in a lot of ways. And so I think that is a piece that is really sorely lacking, that's not really talked about that much. And I can see that there would be a lot of uses, I don't know, in film ideation or drafts of things or whatever, right? But in terms of being able to make intentional choices as to how to create something that you want to express, it for me at least doesn't fulfill that. And I see that there are other artists that are kind of taking the AI as a base and then creating something different with it, which I think has potential to be interesting. But for me, just typing in a prompt and having something pop out, it's not for me. It's not that fulfilling, and I don't think it really, yeah, it's, yeah. Anyways, well, I still want to be nice about it because I know there are a lot of people that are really into it. Like whatever, yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I spoke to someone yesterday who has this NFT, like basically a no-code NFT creation platform, which is, if we're talking about tooling for artists, that's a really amazing tool. But also they're going to integrate like basically an AI into it, and then you can just you can create a collection like by typing in a prompt, and it will just turn it into a collection, which again, it's an interesting tool, and it might be really cool for some simple prompts, like for example, like OCS has a raffle and we need a bunch of NFTs to be tickets to that raffle or something, right? And then we just type in raffle ticket smoke whatever, and then it creates a cool NFT, and we use that as the thing. I think the danger there is that if it's so easy to create all of these collections, it will really create this influx of this soulless art, let's put it that way, that will just flood the market and will be everywhere. And it's also going to be what NFTs might become known for. And there's a lot of this stuff already. Like I really like some AI NFT artists that are very deliberate with their inputs and their they change what they have there. But it can really lead to a kind of mass production of something that is just generally not very interesting. And so I do think that there is this danger where you use this really as a crutch and stop actually honing your craft, which is what you hinted at. So I agree, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's already a bunch of different platforms where you can put in a prompt and your AI generated image, you can click mint NFT and it comes directly on the blockchain. And I can see that there is novelty in that. And the one-of-one art space that we're trying to foster has a little bit of a different kind of intention.
Yeah.
And I also, for me, I'm very intentional with what I put on the blockchain. I'm very intentional of like, okay, this is the piece that I'm minting. Like the description has to be perfect. Like for me, it's very important, and yeah, I guess intentional is the right word. For me to have, when I put something on the blockchain, it's meaningful, and because it's going to exist there forever, or as long as the internet and electricity and humans, whatever. Right. And when I first got into NFTs, a lot of my friends were like, yeah, you should mint on ETH. This was, of course, way back before it was proof of stake. And I was like, no, like the environmental impact of just one, like that's serious. Like you have to be very intentional, very clear of like, okay, I'm committing to this, rather than like, oh no, never mind, I'm gonna take it down and remint it. And when you look through OpenSea, all of the things that are on there, yeah, I prefer just to stay in my bubble and surround myself with people that are kind of on the like-minded approach, and just enjoy wonderful traditional art and uplift each other and try to build communities that are beneficial for the artists and the people that are excited about it and the collectors and everyone involved. So very much like quality over quantity, and real kind of connection and engagement, rather than this sort of superficial novelty side of things.
Beautiful. We're going to close on that note. I'll give you the opportunity to tell people where they can find you, and then we'll close out. Thank you so much. Really, really great talking to you and hear your thoughts on it. Where can people find your one-of-one art and collect it?
So I'm Dr. Revel on most all social media, Dr_REVEL. I guess on Twitter it's Dr. Revel NFT, because someone already took Dr. Revel. And yeah, my art's up on Exchange. It used to be mostly on Form Function, but we have migrated over. And I have something dropping for the good of the mangrove. So if you're into mangrove trees, which you should be because they're incredible, they're one of the only trees that can actually use salt water, and they protect the coastal ecosystems. So that will be coming up very soon. And I also have a few other projects in the work, which I'm excited to share once they're out. But yeah, that's about it.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Becca. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you.
And
it's been such a pleasure.
Thank you. I'm really happy to kind of give this space and the voice to some people and talk about the space. So I'm super happy. We'll do this again very soon. Maybe a different topic, also Web3 related in this forum. Hear from some people who are working in this space. Thank you everybody for tuning in. Thank you for your questions, and we'll see you all very